Hi guys. Okay, so we're just going to move along, and this is our next lesson here. So this lesson is on what happens when mitosis screws up. So what happens when it messes up, when things don't go as they are supposed to go. So first of all, we're just going to take a look at normal replacement. So this is what we've sort of been dealing with so far. So normal cell replacement, we know that cells have lifespans and they're eventually going to die out. Now mitosis happens and cell division, and that's what's necessary for them to replace themselves. So just as a review, remember we had, we've got our mitosis, and then it is multiplying, right? So the nucleus copies, and then we have our cytokinesis where it's going to divide into the two cells. So the cell that ends up dying out is, you can think of it as this cell here is going to go along, and it goes this way, and then this one's going to die out, and this one's going to live, I was going to say a long life, but probably not a long life, a short life, until it too will replace itself, okay? Oh, let me just do that. Okay, good. Now, sometimes that doesn't happen. So some cells, and you can write these down, this is in red, some cells like brain and nerve cells, these are unable to regenerate. And we talked about that the other day. Once they are damaged, the cells no longer send information, so they don't work anymore. So this would be why spinal cord injuries are permanent. Why, people, once they lose or paralyzed or have quadriplegia or paraplegia, once they have that, typically they don't ever regain that. Those cells do not regenerate. Now, what about aging? So basically we age because cells die. So they are either not replaced or they're going to be replaced more slowly. And you guys, obviously, you're not there yet. But if you compared, my face to your face, or your parents' faces to your faces, what would you see on them? Yeah, you'd see wrinkles, right? So aging is not completely understood. If it was, we would have a fountain of youth. I mean, if we knew how to prevent aging, generally speaking, people would, take that option. They would want to find that fountain of youth. So it's kind of a cool thing because science understands a lot, of course. We understand a lot about the human body, but aging, we haven't quite grasped it fully. So changes happen in the cells that affect their ability to repair themselves. So you can copy down those things into your notes. And that's a lovely picture of some old people who are nicely wrinkled. You'll see some age spots, right? Do you guys know what age spots are? They're these things. Those kinds of marks are called age spots. So basically just the pigments in the skin start changing. Now, I can't remember if we talked about, hold on one second here. Oh yeah. Okay, we are going to watch the video and then, well, actually, first of all, let's just talk about wrinkles a little bit. So what are wrinkles? These folds of skin, right? So if you look at wrinkles here, these folds of skin. So why do people get wrinkles? Yeah, so basically what's happening is that your skin cells are dying, and they're losing elasticity. So generally speaking, like if like sometimes you'll get like a line, like if you have socks that are too tight and you'll have a line around your ankle. So you guys are young. That line will disappear really quickly on you. Or even like if you take your nail and just push it into the skin on your hand. So right now, take like your thumbnail or something and just poke it into the skin on your hand. Your skin should bounce back right away. But someone like me, I'm 43, so if I do that, I can see that mark. I'm still looking at it. Yeah, like 20 seconds later, it's still there. It will go away, but it's just going to be a lot slower. Or with the sock line thing, it's going to be a lot longer to take for those marks to go away. So skin loses elasticity as we age, and then of course we have gravity happening, so that's why people get wrinkles, because it's pulling the skin down, and it doesn't have that elastic function anymore. Okay, we're going to watch a video on cancer cells here, and then we're going to answer the questions on your sheet. So be watching on your sheet for the questions while we go through this.
Watch carefully.
Today's topic is the cell cycle and mitosis. But before we get into the cell cycle and mitosis, we want to make sure and talk about why these words are important and how they relate to real life. So if I say the word cancer, this word probably means something to you. Either you know somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer, or you've heard about it on the news. There's many different types of cancers, but one thing they all have in common is that they are caused by uncontrolled cell growth. That means somebody's own cells grow out of control. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other contributing factors. For example, for some cancers, having genetic links, meaning it runs in the family, can make somebody more likely to develop it. Or having excessive exposure to UV light for some cancers. Those are risk factors that can increase your risk, but the major cause of cancer is uncontrolled cell growth. That also means it's something that is not contagious, and it's something that anyone can develop. You have to realize that all the cells in your body are very, very busy, and they're either in one of two different phases. They are either in a phase called interphase, and during interphase, they are just growing, they're replicating their DNA, they're doing their cell functions, or they are in mitosis. Mitosis is a fancy word that means that they are dividing, they are making new cells. Well, if you think about the cell cycle, whether they're in interphase or mitosis, it's kind of like a pie graph. They're spending about 90% of their time in interphase. Most of the time, cells are not dividing. Most of the time, cells are in interphase. They're growing, they're doing their daily cell functions, and they're replicating their DNA. Most of the time, cells are not dividing. Now, depending on what kind of cell, it might do mitosis more or less often. For example, your hair follicle cells, they do mitosis frequently, which is why your hair can grow up to half an inch every month. But other cells, like, for example, your brain cells, your neurons, some of them actually do not perform mitosis, which is why if you have some type of major injury to the spinal cord or to the brain, sometimes those do not heal very well because those cells, they do not replicate. So mitosis is very important in order to generate new cells, which can help with growth. And also, if you damage your cells, if you're walking down the street and you have some kind of accident and you skin your knee, well, you're going to need to repair those damaged cells. You're going to need to be able to do mitosis to make those new cells. The thing is, you don't want your cells to always be doing mitosis, because if they're always doing mitosis, then they're always dividing, and then they're not carrying out their actual function. And that's a problem. That's where checkpoints come in handy. See, along the cell cycle, there are checkpoints to check that the cell is growing correctly and replicating its DNA correctly and doing everything it's supposed to do correctly before it divides. And what happens if the cell fails its checkpoint? The cell does something called apoptosis, which basically means the cell destroys itself. It self-destructs. This might seem kind of harsh, but actually it's really important because it ensures that you don't have these cells that are messed up continue on and divide. You don't want damaged cells to continue on and divide because they might not do what they're supposed to. They might start to grow out of control. They might not be regulated correctly. That's where cancer cells come in. See, cancer cells, as we had said, are your body's own cells that are growing out of control. So they're not following the rules of these checkpoints. They're flying past the checkpoints, going through the cell cycle, and cycling frequently doing mitosis, which means that they're dividing very, very often. And so by doing that, they can grow into these things called tumors, which are really a mass of cancer cells. So we're not really sure what causes them to escape these checkpoints. There's a lot of risk factors that a person can have that can increase their risk of this happening. But when these cells get past these checkpoints and grow out of control, they become a problem because many times they can travel through the bloodstream, they start growing out of control, the body can't identify them and destroy them with the immune system, so this becomes an issue. And usually, one of the treatments that somebody who has cancer will undergo is chemotherapy, and this works by targeting cells that go through the cell cycle quickly and hit mitosis quickly. And that's one reason why somebody often will lose their hair when they're on chemotherapy, because they're on this medication that's targeting fast-growing cells, and your hair follicle cells are also fast-growing cells. Cancer cells have some other factors that make them difficult to treat. One is that cancers have the ability to secrete their own growth hormone. This is very bad because growth hormone, in a sense, think of it as a hormone that says, "Feed me." And what happens is the blood vessels will divert over to those cancer cells and supply the cancer cells with nutrients. This is not good because this means the cancer cells will have the nutrients they need to keep growing out of control. It also can take nutrients away from nearby healthy cells. There's some medications that are being researched that maybe could stop the growth hormone from cancer cells. And in a sense, that would be great because the cancer cells would not be able to get the nutrients to grow out of control anymore. Of course, you have to make sure that the medication is targeting just the cancer cells and that you're not affecting the growth hormone of nearby healthy cells. You wouldn't want that. So it's kind of a tricky situation. So let's recap what we talked about today. We talked about the cell cycle, how cells are more frequently in interphase than they are mitosis. Interphase is when cells are replicating their DNA, or they're growing, carrying out cell processes. In mitosis, the cells are actually dividing. We talked about how during this cell cycle, there's checkpoints that regulate the cell and keep the cell from being able to continue on if it's damaged, unless we're talking about cancer cells, which are cells that have escaped the checkpoint and are growing out of control. Be sure to check out our clip on mitosis. This process is really fascinating, but it's also a really important one in order to understand how your body cells work. That's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Okay. So you're going to answer the questions on your sheet. I think you've probably answered some of them. You can pause the video if you haven't already. We'll go through them though. So number one, do you know anyone who has had or has cancer? So lots of us do. Of course, it's such a common disease for people. Number two, what causes cancer? For that one, it's going to be uncontrolled cell growth. Number three, is cancer contagious? No, you can't catch it from someone. Number four, what happens usually if a cell fails at the checkpoints? And you would say it self-destructs at this point. Number five, what do groups of cancer cells become? They become tumors. Number six, what is chemotherapy and how does it work? Chemotherapy is a type of radiation and it targets the fast-growing cells. Number seven, why do chemo patients lose their hair? They lose their hair because hair follicles or hair cells are also very quickly, so the chemotherapy will target it. Number eight, how do you think advances in science and technology could help people with spinal cord injuries? So there's lots of things there. There's a lot of field of assistive technology or research, and this kind of leads into number 9 here, stem cell research. Stem cells are cells that are found in fetal tissue, and so that would be the fetus. So before the human fetus is born, it's called a fetus. So stem cells can be used. They can act. They're really unique cells, and they can be used to regenerate where normally something wouldn't regenerate. And so they're important in terms of spinal cord research, but it's a little tricky because where do you get stem cells from. So sometimes it's from fetal tissue. This would be fetuses who have been aborted or miscarried, something like that. So it can be a very controversial subject for people. Yeah, if we were in person, we'd discuss this more. Okay, so your assignment for this particular lesson is in your textbook. So it's page 15, questions 5 to 10. And then I'll correct those with you guys tomorrow, so on Tuesday. We're also going to have a quiz that will cover the last 3 lessons that we've done here, and we'll do that on Wednesday, but I'll give you guys more information about that later. Okay, take care, everyone.